And welcome back to the Old Gatbox Podcast, also Tide 100.9. You can catch us on YouTube, CBS Sports HQ. We're busy, what can I say, talking golf, talking football. And a man who knows more about Georgia football than anybody else, and I get this from my guys on the PGA Tour, is Radi Nabulsi, and also my dear friend Jim Donnan, who coached the Bulldogs back in the day. He hooked me up with Radi, and he joins us now to break down what is going to be the biggest game here in the early part of the season, Georgia at Alabama. Radi, first off, great to see you. It's been great talking to you over the last 48 hours. How are you?
We're doing fantastic. I appreciate you having me on. I think Coach lied to you. Nobody knows more about the Georgia Bulldogs than Coach Jim Donnan. There's no question in my mind.
Yeah, no, he's close with Mike Bobo and the guys, loves to go to practice, and you're right. His knowledge goes way, way back. We should mention, listen, when you cover Georgia, UGA Sports Live, UGAsports.com, Radi's the guy. Also, the Game Day Cast, which is popular. It's like the Manning Cast. He and Coach Donnan and Dane Young get together on Saturdays during the game, and they break down every play. And Radi, a lot of people are dialing in. I mean, you're talking, what, 10, 20, 30,000 people are listening to you guys.
No, we get about 50 to 80,000 people each weekend that
That's
tune
awesome.
in. And they watch Coach Don and watch the game. That's the best way I can explain it. We can't show the game. The CBS, ABC, all those folks tend to get mad about that. But we have a camera on Coach Don, and he basically breaks the game down as it happens, kind of like the Mannings did. They copied us. We were doing it long before they did. So, Peyton, I need that check.
Yeah, exactly. I remember when Coach Donnan started that, and he sent me the link. He goes, "Hey, Doug, watch this." And this was years ago, and I got a big kick out of it. And listen, you guys do a great job. And if you're a Georgia fan, it's a no-brainer. And I will say this, Radi, too. Listen, I do a lot of work on the PGA Tour, and these golfers, and there's more Georgia Bulldogs on the tour than anybody else. And listen, I can run down the list. You know, Brian Harmon, Kevin Kisner, Harris English, Sepp Straka, Davis Thompson, Russell Henley. I mean, you name them. They're all huge football fans. And when I kind of hang out with them, they're talking about stuff they picked up from you on X or maybe on the .com site. So you're well respected among the golfers on the PGA Tour. I just want you to know that.
Yeah, they can send a check too. But those are my buddies. They're all members of the UGA Sports sites. I try to get to the Masters or any of the tournaments they're in. You can't really cheer for them like you want to, but I let them know I'm there, and they're the best. They are rabid Georgia fans. Oh. Absolutely. I mean, Kevin Kisner, he goes to practice all the time. Brian Harmon called us one time right before his first Masters on a Wednesday. I'm like, don't you tee off in the morning in your first Masters. Why are you texting back and forth with us? But he wanted Georgia information. So, yeah, they're diehards, guys. And the Georgia fans, I mean, they're sideways about this game coming up.
I know, and we all are. I'm so excited. Obviously, I mean, it looks like President Trump is going to be there, Radi. Last time he was in Tuscaloosa was LSU, Alabama, 2019. That was the great Joe Burrow team and Tua. I don't know if there's going to be that many points in this one. I don't know how long President Trump's going to stick around, but it's going to be a slugfest, to say the least. Don't you agree?
It is going to be crazy. Looking at how Georgia's offense has performed in the two games that weren't against Tennessee Tech, the first half, Georgia, they're not getting off to a fast start. So I do not see this as being, a 45-42 shootout. This is going to be probably a low-scoring game because you have two really good defenses. And I do wonder, how Georgia's defense is going to hold up. I know that Alabama's defense is a little young in the secondary, but Georgia's replaced a lot of parts too, and they haven't seen anything, like Alabama yet. So this is going to be a game to tell the tale of where these two teams are. There's no question in my mind that they haven't seen anything like this yet.
Hey, tell me this, Radi, before we get to specifics about the game, and listen, the number of athletes that'll be on the field for Georgia, Alabama will be amazing, and it really comes down to these great players making individual plays. We know that, but would you agree these are the top two programs in the country, with all due respect to Texas and Ohio State? I mean, when you look at the number of 4 and 5 stars, the recruiting, even with the new coach at Alabama, wouldn't you say these are the top 1 and 2 programs in the nation?
Unquestionably, and I'm not just saying that because I cover Georgia. We do cover recruiting at UGA Sports. We're part of the Rivals Network, and I mean, recruiting is our bread and butter. That's the only thing behind our paywall. Everything else we put out for free, but the recruiting stuff, that's what the folks come for. Going up and down the rosters, I mean, I'm like, okay, well, I remember covering this kid in Tampa at a Under Armour Combine. He's a 5-star now. He's third string. Here's a 4-star that I thought was one of the best wide receivers I'd seen in 10 years. He's second string at Alabama, or he's third string at Georgia. Up and down. And again, that's not just me saying it. That's talking to NFL scouts. We cover the combine every year. And when those guys are coming to the Georgia's Pro Day, I get a lot of calls. They ask me questions. And I see them at the NFL combine, and we talk about Georgia. And they're like, yeah, we went to Clemson first, and then we went to Georgia. It's like it's night and day, and the NFL scouts told us that game in Atlanta wasn't going to be close because just of the roster. So you're right. And you remember the last time these two teams met, how many of those guys on both sides were drafted? I mean, I think every one of Georgia's defensive players was drafted. 10 out of 11 Alabama's offensive players were drafted. It's just nuts.
Are you surprised? I mean, the point spreads being what they are. I mean, obviously you try to get equal money on both sides, but it's pretty solid. Georgia, 4.5-point favorite on the road, and obviously, I mean, Georgia was the number one, now number two, whatever. Do you agree with that 4.5-point spread, or is that just something the odds makers are doing to get equal money bet?
I don't agree with it. Well, if anything, I would be taking Alabama in the points. I mean, the stadium's going to be sideways, and Georgia has yet to show me that they can get off to a fast start. And if you get behind against a team like Alabama with its scoring potential, and Kalen DeBoer, we know what he does, then all of a sudden now you're more one-dimensional. Georgia is a balanced attack. If you make them one-dimensional, they're a lot easier to defend. That means it's what Kirby likes to do. He loves to take away a team's either run or their pass, make them one-dimensional, and allow his defense to tee off, knowing what they have to do. So, and that's why he likes to get ahead. Makes the other team have to throw it. You let your defense pin their ears back and come after them. It's the Nick Saban MO for years. I haven't seen Georgia's offense be able to do that. Plus, Georgia's offense right now Georgia's team is the number one team in the SEC for penalties. They don't look like they normally do. They've been very sloppy. They've had a lot of penalties at extended drives. Last week they couldn't tackle. Granted, they did good in the red zone. They have not let anybody score a touchdown on them yet. Granted, one of those teams was Tennessee Tech and a Clemson team that wasn't as good as it could have been. But Kentucky went up and down the field on them. 13 play drives, 11 play drives, 8, 11, 9. They only had 1 3 and out. That is not a Kirby Smart team. So to me, saying that Georgia's going to come in, win by more than a field goal, I'm like, I just don't know that yet. So again, I can never get into the minds of Vegas. That's why I'm poor. But it's I don't believe that I would be going 4.5 right now.
Well, it was interesting watching the Kentucky game. Between the 30s, you're right. The Kentucky offense moved it between the 30s, got bogged down. Great field goal kicker, 4 field goals. But all in all, I thought the Georgia defense did what they usually do. They were aggressive. They came up with big stops when they have to, which is kind of their MO since Kirby's been there. So defensively, I thought they were outstanding. Yes, offensively, they struggled. I thought the quarterback, I thought Carson completed some pretty important passes there in the second half. And I know Coach Donnan, I watched your show the other day, and he thought the quarterback played much better in the second half. So, again, though, I think you're right. What kind of start will Georgia get off to? Because in the first half, remember, only 6 points against Clemson. Second half, they came on strong.
So you got 2 halves of the game. Against 2 good teams, you scored 12 points. That is not the offensive juggernaut we were expecting this team when they came out. You've got an offensive line that should be one of the best in the nation. You couldn't run the ball effectively in either first half. You've got a list of wide receivers who can make spectacular plays. At least 2, maybe 3 of them will be drafted. You weren't moving the ball down the field. You got a quarterback who was the lead in the Heisman race for a while. He was inaccurate, little off on his timing. But then other times he threads the needle and makes amazing plays, extends plays with his legs. So in other words, I'm not trying to downplay this team. They have a ridiculous amount of talent, like you were saying, on both sides of the ball. The same with Alabama. But it's those individual plays. You have a bubble screen. The tight end doesn't block the man on the edge. It's dropped. You have a toss to the edge. The tight end on the other side misses a block, open field tackle. An open field block leads to an open field tackle, and the plays a 3-yard loss. Bad snaps. You've had 2 bad snaps in the last game. In other words, it's individual players making individual plays, like you said earlier. I just haven't seen Georgia put it together, and they're going to need to do that and not be penalized. This is big as well. in the first half and not wait till the second half. When everything clicks in the second half, they take off and they look unstoppable. They look like the number one team in the nation. But in the first two halves, they have not. So that's you can't do that against Alabama. You'll be looking at a 21-3 deficit.
Well, I mean, obviously it goes back to the old adage, and Coach Donovan says it a million times. You got to run the football. You got to stop the run. You got to be on the plus side of the giveaway, takeaway. And it comes down then to the big guys up front. I know Georgia's had some injuries there in the offensive line. Alabama, had their two big tackles back, Proctor and Pritchard. They came back last week, and that's seemingly solidified for now. The center from Washington seems like he's a pretty good player. He came over with his coach. So would you say the advantage for the offensive line right now leans on Alabama, Roddy, or because of the injuries? Or how would you break that down?
I would definitely give them the advantage. Proctor is a first rounder in my mind. I have very little question there. And, that's always been Kirby's most important thing. His initial press conference 9 years ago, the first thing he said was, we got to get bigger. He had met some of his offensive linemen, and I think he confused one of his guards for a fullback. He says, this is unacceptable. We've got to get – and he did. And he's got multiple – I think he has 4 starting tackles in the NFL right now. And he's got 2 titles under his belt, and he's played for a third. That just – it goes to show he knows you build SEC football from the inside out. Having Michael Williams banged up, having Warren Brinson on the defensive line also with an Achilles issue. Jordan Hall is just now getting back, hasn't played this year from his tightrope surgery. Kentucky saw that. They went right at Georgia and right up the middle, and that's why I was saying, yes, they moved the ball because Georgia was getting penetration but wasn't making tackles. Now, if they tackle like they normally do, there's a lot more 3 and outs in the Kentucky game. Going up against the Alabama offense is going to be 10 times harder. And when you're down 3 defensive linemen, the advantage is definitely their court. On the flip side, Georgia it was announced yesterday that Tate Ratledge, Georgia's first team All-SEC right guard, just had tightrope surgery, so he's out, for the immediate future, maybe 4 weeks or so before we see him back. So now, don't get me wrong, they've got 2 really good guards there, so Georgia's offensive line is good, but they have not been able to impose their will with the run like we've seen in the past. And in the second half, though, against Clemson, they were running at will. I would like to see that battle, to me, will be more telling, because if Georgia can't run it in Bryant-Denny Stadium, it's going to be ugly.
Well, listen, I think it's going to be close. I don't think there's any question about that, and I think both teams will be semi-conservative just because the players, the athletes that are on the field. Roddy, does it basically come down to Carson Beck, Jalen Milroe, the 2 quarterbacks? That's obviously every level. The quarterback's got to make plays, but they're both going to have to deliver. And I don't know how good Wisconsin is. I have no idea. Milroe looked great, but what do you think? Is it a quarterback who comes up with a big play when needed, maybe late in that game?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you said it. If you ask Kirby and you give him 100% truth serum, Kirby, what's the key to this game? And he's going to say, well, we can't have penalties, we can't have turnovers, we got to protect the ball, and we got to make explosive plays. And you'll say, well, that's what you said in the press conference when before I gave you the truth serum. And he's like, well, that's what he believes in his core body. You ask Coach Donnan, you ask Coach Rick, you ask Coach Spurrier, anybody, they'll tell you, hey, when you have a clash of titans like this, it's going to come down to who makes a big explosive play and who doesn't turn the ball over. Georgia and Alabama met last year. Georgia turned the ball over on their side of the field. Alabama had more explosive plays. Alabama leads the nation right now in plays of over 25 yards. Georgia hasn't given up a touchdown in 3 games. Something's going to have to happen there. So if Jalen Milroe, who can take off with his legs, which we saw was a problem for Georgia, and it has been for years, and it's a problem for every defense, let's call it what it is, but if Georgia has a weakness, it is against running quarterbacks, and Milroe just smoked every team he's played. He can fly. That's a problem for Georgia. They had to spy Brock Vandagriff last week because he was making plays with his legs. So now all of a sudden you have to keep a guy in to spy him. And if Carson Beck, and if he's has a little bit better accuracy on some of these timing routes. There was a slant to Dylan Bell the other day that thrown a little bit behind him, but that's a touchdown if he makes it. He's got one of the fastest players in college football, and number 11, Arian Smith. Hit Arian on just a go route, a fly, a post, a 9 route, let's go, and just throw it up there. And if he gets that on the run, That's what was the dagger that allowed Georgia to beat Ohio State. So he's got that potential. But I'm with you. It's going to come down to the quarterbacks protecting the ball, which sounds boring, but making those throws or making those runs that are explosive plays that change the field possession. Because, like I said, it's going to be very conservative. And I think one advantage Georgia does have is their kicking game is ridiculous. I mean, they've got one of the best punters in the nation, and they've got an automatic field goal kicker. That counts for a lot in a game that can be this close.
Yeah, no doubt. It is interesting. At Kentucky for Georgia, at Alabama, at Texas, at Ole Miss. Wow. That's a fairly challenging road schedule looking ahead, right?
Yeah, it's brutal. I mean, I looked at it last week. There's 6 of the top 7 teams in the nation are the SEC, and Georgia plays 4 of them, 3 of which are on the road. I'm like, okay, I don't want to hear any complaints about soft schedules when you're going to play. I think that the 3 teams they have to play on the road were all in the top 5. So it's like, this is going to be fun. It's going to be a fun season.
Well,
so.
and really, Alabama, they love their coaches from the past, and Kirby's held in very, very high esteem. And yet, 1 in 5 all-time against Nick, now goes against Kalen DeBoer. Oh, yeah, the boos will rain down, but they have a lot of respect for him. But I know he wants to win badly in Tuscaloosa. That adds even another element to this crazy game.
It was the same thing last week when we were at Kentucky. We spoke to Jamas Johnson, the former Georgia inside linebacker. He's a 2-year starter. He transfers to Kentucky. We speak to Brock Vandegrift, he graduated from Georgia before he transferred to Kentucky. He was there 3 years. And he was at, do you want to beat Georgia more, because it's your former team? Oh, no. You lie. You liars. And you can ask Kirby, goes, Kirby, it's an Alabama game. I know Kirby's one of the most competitive guys in the world. He will body check you in a game of tiddlywinks. And you're going to sit there and tell me that he doesn't want to go into Bryant-Denny Stadium, a team that has had his team's number, and he doesn't want to win in their home stadium? Come on. This game it means a lot to him. Plus, he also knows that this is the narrative. I mean, Kirby's 42-2 or something. He's got 42 regular season wins. He's lost 2 games in the last 3 years, both of them in Alabama. I don't care how much you want to pat yourself on the back, which he should. No one's done it. This is a record that goes back to the 50s for success. Something hasn't been done in 70 years. But those 2 losses, they prey on him. You want that perfection. What he always says, what can we do to get better? Well, the one thing you can do to get better for your Georgia is beat Alabama. So here's his chance this coming weekend, or 2 weeks.
Well, yeah, and needless to say, looking ahead, I mean, this is early in the season. Let's be honest. And with those games we mentioned at Texas, at Ole Miss, and then for Alabama, you still got Tennessee. You still have to go to Oklahoma. I mean, this is an important game early, but Roddy, man, there's some big games down the road. So let's don't put too much in the basket here. It is a big one, but there's still some big ones down the road.
But think about whoever comes out on the winning side of this. If Alabama wins this game, they again stopped Georgia. They stopped the win streak. They beat the number one, who was the number 1 team in the nation, and the fan base is so happy with Kalen DeBoer. Hey, we're right there. We're still there. And the narrative, Kirby still can't beat Alabama. He can win titles, but he can't beat Alabama. Okay, that's not – it might bug him, but it's not going to bug most people, because if you wind up winning the title later on, what does it matter that you lost one? Very few teams that win the title go undefeated. It's completely understood. But if Georgia wins this one, it's like, okay, maybe you've exercised that issue, and you take a lot of pressure off going to Texas, going to Ole Miss, hosting Tennessee, because you've got this big win in your back pocket. You can relax now, because if you lose this one and now you're going to Texas, that's a tough game. You lose that one, now the season's on. Yeah, the season, you should still make the playoffs, but it's a lot more questionable if you don't have one of those signature wins in your pocket. So you're right. It is early in the season. You and I both know that an early season loss by everyone thinks it's devastating now. 3 months from now, when we're in December, it's just a blip. I mean, we saw that last year when Georgia didn't lose a regular season game, and the other teams did, and they're like, yeah, but they lost to Alabama in the postseason. I'm like, well, yeah, but these other guys lost too. Yeah, but that was 100 years ago. So you're right. We can't put everything on this one, but it's going to give somebody a get out of jail free card.
Yeah, absolutely. Well said. Can't wait. Roddy, we appreciate it. Coach Don was right, man. You know your stuff. I got to get you back on. And I'm sure
he's
down
right
the
over
road
here
here.
on the screen telling me what to say.
There you go. Yeah, you said a lot of stuff that sounded like him, so I know you've been working with him. You sound like an old coach, but hey, we do appreciate it, my man. Keep up the good work. And when I'm out on the PGA Tour, I'm going to score some points when I tell the guys, hey, guess who I had on my podcast, my show? And they're going to be pumped, those golfers from Georgia.
Tell Kevin Kisner to give me back my 9-iron.
There you go. Yeah, he may be. He may be in the broadcast booth. You never know. So
He's gonna, if he ever does, I'm out of a job.
Yes, exactly. So appreciate it, my man. Thank you.
Thank you.